Hello chess friends and welcome to your Out of Chess channel and welcome to a spectacular game from the computer chess rating list website, the amazing CCRL. We have here Stockfish 17 against another top engine Lizard in an amazing normal variation of the Nimzo-Indian Defense. And you know, sometimes in the Nimzo-Indian Defense you have a huge positional problems. Many times in the Nimzo-Indian Defense your dark square bishop is simply the worst piece on the board. And what's amazing in this game is that actually Stockfish will show us here how to improve this dark square bishop, how to activate this bishop. Although it's in the beginning blocked out by its own pawn, Stockfish will develop in such an amazing way, and actually in the end of the game the worst bishop will become simply the best minor piece on the board. It will be an explosion then all over the board. So in my opinion, a great strategic game in which Stockfish shows us here how to improve your pieces, how to activate them then in the later stage of the game. So let's see now what happened with the white pieces here. The fish opened with the move d4. The Lizard's response was knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to c3, and now after bishop to b4 we have the Nimzo-Indian Defense on the board. e3 normal variation, castling bishop to d3, the bishop attack, and now after move c5, knight to f3 and d5 we have now this idea by black to simplify the game in the early stage of the opening, simply training off more pawns, of course getting then of course normal development, somehow also if possible get the light square bishop into the game. So I would say here already after kingside castling, equal position now for both sides without any drama, without any complications. Both engines I think have here good chances in the middle game stage. Knight to c6 here by Lizard. Stockfish continues now with a3, and there are now basically two choices. One is I think a more tactical approach with bishop to a5, but then after something like c takes d5, e takes d5, and d takes c5, I think black should then go into this line where okay, black is down a pawn but has of course now clear objects here. You can attack this one, you can of course attack also the c5 pawn. The bishop of whites here on c1 is of course not on the optimal square, still it's blocked out by its own pawn. So also I think a decent game here for black. So you see in the Nimzo-Indian Defense, if you're playing the game correctly, you have I think decent chances. So it's really a game who is better on the board. I think if you want to test out each other who is really better in chess, the Nimzo-Indian Defense is really the perfect opening. Now from a3, that's why here bishop to c3 played by Lizard is simply doubling up now the pawn structure on c5. You see now in this even in this scenario again the dark square bishop of white is not a good piece, simply blocked by the pawn on e3. And also even if you develop it on this diagonal, still the bishop has a tough time in order to get somehow back into the game because there are simply too many pawns on dark square. So I think the positional compensation that black has here is I think a good one for the lost bishop pair in the early opening, because still of course black has also some issues with the light square bishop, but later maybe with b6, bishop to a6, I think black has also solid chances then in the game. So nothing dramatic as I said so far in the game, but here as I said this is an amazing game which shows us here how to activate this really bad bishop on c1, how this bishop will become now simply the most powerful piece on the board. Really amazing stuff by Stockfish. So here queen to c7, Lizard connects now the queen to the square c4. If something clears, then of course the tactical threat could be maybe in some lines even d takes c4. Stockfish continues now with an amazing idea h3. You see now why this move is so important, because after knight to a5, putting more pressure against this weakness on c4, Stockfish simply trade off now the pieces. After e takes d5, you see now with the move h3 that Stockfish played, Stockfish prevented some ideas like bishop to g4, not allowing of course the light square bishop to come actively into the game. And now Stockfish plays knight to e5, cements now the knight, and Stockfish is trying now to build an amazing attacking formation with the move f4, then maybe even queen to f3 or rook to f3, rook to g3, and then suddenly with 4-5 pieces maybe here attacking simply the king side. So Stockfish builds now really again a nice setup, a really firm setup that could damage now black after king side castling. We have now bishop to e6 and now f3, preventing now also knight to e4 by black. Black would also love to somehow cement the position maybe with the knight here on the other side of the board, or in white's position, in white's camp on e4. From f3, knight to d7, now Stockfish plays f4, and now the knight on e5 is really well placed, it's cemented, it's fixed. And the issue for black is here that you cannot play f6. After f6 you get immediately the Greek gift tactic. After something like this, queen to h5, then knight to g6 would come, you have to step back with the rook, then f5, you cannot escape because you get checkmated immediately, so it's not working. So in this scenario you would be probably forced to give up again the bishop back for the pawn. And now obviously I think again white is much better. Look at this pure domination here on this side of the board. Maybe the rook can be even included. Maybe we can even sack the pawn just in order to include the dark square bishop into the game, then rook to f1. So too many options, I think. Game over here already for black. So that's why after move f4, knight to f6. Again, Lizard gets the knight back into the defense. The knight is very important here as a defender of the h7 square. And so far, as we mentioned, again, let's point this out, that the bishop on c1 is not well placed. It's simply too blocked by these pawns. But in Stockfish, main plan is somehow how to clear these pawns, how to improve them, how to advance them just in order to activate the dark square bishop. So far, the other pieces are on optimal squares, on the best squares on the board. And for knight to f6, Stockfish finds first of all this plan: queen to e1, trying to reroute and queen to the square h4, what it could be of course useful, and would simply hit now then with the bishop combined the weak square on h7. What should you do? If you try here b6 or something, I just wanted to show you maybe a slightly too passive move here for black. If you try maybe a bad move like b6, then f5 would happen, and then you have to step back with the bishop, and suddenly there is again this idea: queen to h4, rook to f3, rook to g3. I think is also an optimal choice. Then maybe targeting the g file. Again, too much pressure, too many pieces are targeting here black's king. So that's why from queen to e1, here bishop to d7 played by a Lizard, simply escaping with the bishop, not allowing here an extra tempo with the move f5 by white. Queen to h4 anyway by the fish. We have bishop to a4, and now Lizard is targeting here the weak square on b3. We have now bishop to f5, h6. You cannot play g6 here. You would love to do that, but of course then the knight on f6 is hanging. So here I have move bishop to f5, h6 by Lizard, and now comes the signature move again by the fish, the move that we always love to see in Stockfish games. Stockfish plays now the amazing rook lift with rook to a2. And the idea is clear. This rook on the f-file is already very dangerous. What Stockfish is trying to do is to play something like g4 and then rook to g2. And now then both of these rooks would be very active on the f and g file. The queen is already on the h file, again building enormous pressure against the endangered king on g8. We have now knight to c4. Lizard gets now this beautiful square for the knight, but it doesn't matter. Stockfish continues now with the plan. Knight to d6. We have now rook to g2, and now knight takes f5. Maybe just a slightly risky line here that Lizard is doing. Maybe there are also some options with c4, but even if you play c4, this position gets simply too blocked on this side of the board. You'll have to play too many moves here, like b5, a5, who knows, b4. All of that seems maybe tempting, but it's a little bit too slow. Even if you manage to get the pass pawn on the queen side, what are you going to do? Still, you have to, I don't know, maybe use 6, 7, maybe even 10 moves in order to make any threat on this side of the board. I think we can agree that already on the king side, very dangerous things are already happening. So that's why blocking maybe the position on the queen side is also not a good choice. So here Lizard tried to simplify the game by trading off the knight for a bishop, which was of course a very active piece, and Lizard calculated, okay, maybe I have now the open g file for white, but at least this bishop on c1 is still not a good piece. Okay, the knight is well placed, this rook is well placed, the queen is well placed, but the bishop on c1 is still not a good piece. And here Lizard first of all escapes with the king on h7. Here from king to h7, Stockfish now really shows how to get this beautiful bad dark square bishop finally into the game. Stockfish first of all plays the amazing c4. This is the way to go. The idea is clear. We want to get the bishop on b2, but still many pawns are standing in the way of the dark square bishop. What should you do? For instance, if you try c takes d4, this wouldn't be good. Then bishop to b2 immediately. And even if you continue with d takes e3 or something, if you continue to grab more pawns, I wanted to show you why it's so dangerous to liberate now finally the dark square bishop, because now you get a dangerous tactic with rook to g7, and this tactical shot is always there somewhere in the air. It's always present as a dangerous possibility against black's king, because if a rook to g7, king to g7, and knight to g4, you're getting destroyed around the square f6. You can just prolong the game, but it's obviously game over here for black. So that's why c4, the first brilliant move I would say here by the fish, opening up now here finally, at least for a little bit, the dark square diagonal. So far the bishop is not playing, but Stockfish is preparing somehow to include the dark square bishop into the game. We have now d takes c4, and now Stockfish plays another follow-up. Brilliant move again, d5. Again with the same plan, bishop to b2, and put more pressure against the weak square on g7. And what should you do? If you try something like knight to d5, then again with the same scenario, we play e4, then you're trying to escape, and then bishop to b2. You could maybe try something like rook from a to d8, but then again this tactic, rook takes g7, king to g7, knight to g4, we have seen is simply destroying black's defense. And even if the only way maybe in this position to somehow survive the attack is to get somehow the rook on the g file, but then again knight to f3, liberating the dark square diagonal. Then after something like knight to e4, look at this, even knight to g5 is working here. So too much pressure here. You have to now give up here the knight for knight. You have to trade off around the square g5 because you cannot step back. Obviously queen takes h6 is amazing checkmate pattern here immediately, because you cannot of course capture the queen because of the dark square bishop's activity. So here maybe after knight to g5 you could try knight takes g5, but then f takes g5, bishop to c6, g6, f takes g6, look at this, f takes g6, and then again the same pattern, queen takes h6. Stunning checkmate. So here that's why after move d5, you cannot pick up the pawn, you cannot do anything. This you can start to maybe push some pawns here, but again it's a little bit too slow here. Lizard tried knight to e4, but Stockfish plays now another beautiful move, f6. Look how the pawns are rolling just in order to create certain damage here around the square g7. That's the obvious target that Stockfish wants now to hit. Knight to f6, and now a beautiful follow-up, king to h1 again, with the preparation to put more pressure, creating maybe a rook battery on the g file with both of these rooks. We have now knight to e4, now comes this idea, rook to g8, and now queen to h5, hitting now also this weakness on f7. We have now g6, and now queen to f3 attacks now the knight. And now you have to play f5 here in order to protect the knight. Even if you try something like knight to f6, then finally this bishop is coming into the game. Maybe you're trying to trade off this one, but then the pawn on f7 is hanging, so you cannot basically compete anymore against this knight on e5. Very tough position again for black to handle. So that's why after queen to f3, here a Lizard tried f5, and now Stockfish clears the position. Finally the position is collapsing here for black. The position is exploding in front of black's king. Rook takes g6, rook takes g6, and now a rook to g8. But now again a beautiful move here by the fish, queen to h5, allowing even the royal fork here with knight to g3. But it doesn't matter, Stockfish wanted to get this one, because if a rook to g3 and rook takes g3, Stockfish temporarily gave up now the exchange just in order to hit the pawn on f5, and there's not so much that can be done. You have to now escape to g8, and now finally knight to g4, locking out now the rook. Look at this, with the threat of knight to f6. For instance, you try something like c3, then knight to f6, and now we attack the rook. You have to step back here, we attack the pawn, and in one moment again you have to give up here the rook for the exchange. So it's simply also not working here for black. After knight to g4, that's why rook takes g4, Stockfish takes out now with the queen. Here Lizard is trying to simplify the game by trading off the queens, but Stockfish plays a calm bishop to d2, controls the progress of the c pawn now, is not allowing of course this pawn to be advanced. We have now bishop to c2, Stockfish includes now the king into the game, and now after king to f7, king to g3. Okay, here bishop to e4 was played by Lizard just in order to grab this pawn, but it doesn't matter. Stockfish created now three connected, very mobile, very well placed pawns now in the center of the board. After king to f4, we have now king to c6, and now finally e4, and these pawns are marching, obviously completely winning endgame here for white. But okay, here Lizard battles, Stockfish advances the pawn. Here Lizard has to now give up the bishop for 2 pawns, but now also look at this, the pawn on h6 is hanging, there's nothing that can be done. b5, Stockfish took it, c3, simply got the king closer, and you see after king to c3, you cannot even play king to f4, you cannot have access to the pawn on g4 here. After move king to e4, in this particular position, Lizard resigned. So great game, I would say. really interesting and instructive stuff here by Stockfish, how to get this Dark Bishop into the game. First of all, also this amazing rook lift, then the fixation around the square f5, liberating the g file, then putting more pressure around the square g7. Again, a wild game by the strongest chess engine in the world by Stockfish 17. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. I think this was maybe instructive for you to see how to maybe beat, how to destroy the very solid Nimzo-Indian Defense with the white pieces. If you want to see some other beautiful strategic and also amazing tactical games like this, check out our commented chess games played by computer series. Here's the link of the playlist. And if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos. And what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.